You can't do better on this beautiful morning than hanging out with Bobbi Ann Brady, MPP Haldeman Norfolk, Dave Scott. Bobby, how are you?
I'm good, Dave. How are you?
Perfect. Look, I got a couple questions that were sent in, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Um, Nothing too deep, but issues that are sort of surfacing in Norfolk County that maybe we need to look at. The first one comes from a person who uses Ride Norfolk. And it was brought to my attention that in 2025, part of the funding will be cut for that. So the bus that works around Norfolk and into Brantford. And what they're losing apparently is the funding for the Brantford run. Now, I know that older folks tend to use it for medical appointments. I reached out to Norfolk County. They're going to try and do their best to have that going in some form. But I got to ask, why is Doug Ford taking this away? This is a critical component for people living in rural Norfolk and probably Haldeman too.
Yeah, I think this is just more indication that this government, this conservative government, is not in touch with rural Ontario. And it's sad because many of their MPPs, many of the folks that form that government are rural members. And we see very urban-centric policy coming out of this government. This is one of those things. I haven't always been a huge fan of kind of the way Ride Norfolk has been set up. I think we could do it a little more efficiently, especially within Norfolk. But that ride from Norfolk to Brantford for our seniors, for those people who don't have a driver's license or who aren't comfortable driving into Brantford, that needs to be maintained. That is kind of the piece of Ride Norfolk that is the most integral. So I haven't heard from the county yet on this issue, but I would love to be working with Norfolk County on finding a way to, save this program, at least that ride from Norfolk to Brantford. And, I'd be the first one to go back to the government and say, hey, look, this is a really bad idea. And, with the cost of gas, inflation, everything going up these days, having a car, putting gas in it and paying for insurance is not an option for everyone. So I would love to work with the county to go back to the government and say, hey, let's rethink this.
And that's, I've did stories over the years on Ride Norfolk, and I think it's one of those things that was needed. I remember as a kid growing up, and the bus used to run through Dover to Hamilton and had stops all over Norfolk County. And I just thought that was a critical component. And I like what they've done with it. I think starting in late July, I believe it's pay as you go. So you can call in the service, which I think is a great idea. I mean, you got to update as you go along for sure. But yeah, I think
I
that
think
Brantford,
they've made good changes. I think that they looked at the program originally and went, hey, this isn't working as well as it should. And I think they responded to much of what the taxpayer was kind of saying, especially those who were paying for it but didn't use it. And I think that they've made it a little more efficient. But that kind of long distance ride, we need to maintain that because connectivity in rural Ontario, the lack of it is a real thing. I talked about this at a meeting last night. We are disadvantaged in many ways. We love living here, and we like our way of life, but there's just a few things that we still need from government. For those who need to get to medical appointments and everything else. If we're not going to have a full complement of doctors and healthcare providers in our riding, then we at least need to be helping those people get from Haldeman Norfolk to those healthcare providers who can, help them out. So I look forward to working with the county on lobbying the government on rethinking this one.
my next question comes from a local optometrist, and she asked about the provincial funding. They're redistribution of funds for eye care. There's some cuts along the way. It seems to be affecting more the seniors, where they're asking them to go to 18 months. I think OHIP's kicking this in September 1. My concern when I talked to this person was, so if you get something in your eye, they want you to go to Emerge, but the Emerge is going to send you back to the optometrist. Like, it seems like it's a double standard here. Why aren't we just, if they're taking that money out of the optometrist, like if they're taking money away from optometrists, for that seems ridiculous. Like, I would rather go to the optometrist first, save on the ER load, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Thoughts?
It's robbing Peter to pay Paul, in my opinion. So I think that the government's looking at this going, hey, if we extend this to 18 months, we're going to have this short-term savings. And we know that short-term savings always ends up being long-term spending. And so, we have a government who continually boasts about their programs and their incentives to keep seniors in their own homes. Well, here's an example. Eye care is very, very important to the overall health of an individual. So we want to keep seniors at home, and yet we do something like this where we say, hey, we're now going to say, instead of 12 months, we're going to extend that to 18 months. That goes against the whole idea of helping seniors age, well at home. And so we end up, maybe with a little bit of a savings up front, but in the long term, it's going to end up costing us as a taxpayer a heck of a lot more money, because if there's an issue that is caught by the optometrist at 12 months, as opposed to 18, that early intervention can mean greater healthcare for that individual and a savings to the taxpayer.
I don't see the logic in this at all. I agree with you 100%. It's like, look, just leave it at a year. It's important. Even if your eyes are healthy, you still need to be checked, as we age. Not me and you, though. Anyway, the last one is on, this is a federal issue, but again, I was asked to get your thoughts on this. The federal budget, C-47, Section 20, there's a section about natural healthcare products, supplements. Feds are kind of playing with it. It's been established since, I believe, 2004. There was regulations in place. So it's all done, through the proper channels. My gut feeling is that there's tariffs being put in place here. They're going to say what you can and cannot have. I have problems with this. If I want to use a supplement, I think that's my choice. Don't tax any more of this stuff. Come on. We're trying to stay healthy here. We're trying to cut down on the load on the hospitals. Thoughts on this? I know this is a federal issue, but I know
it's federal, Dave, but I'm very passionate about this. And I've been watching this one for quite a long time personally, because I'm a huge supplement taker. This may not be popular, but I will go to my local health food store, or I'll go to, my naturopath before I'll go to my doctor, before I'll go to the pharmacist, because I believe in taking control of my own personal health care. That may not be the answer for most people, but it is, it's always worked for me. And I feel that I get, a lot of attention if I go to the health food store or to my naturopath, and I don't always have to take medicine. I can take a vitamin or whatever. And it's always worked for me. And I saw this during COVID. They were, there was talk that they were going to take two items out of production here in Canada, or take them right off the market. One was NAC and one was quercetin. Both of them help with respiratory issues. And I was taking them during COVID. I had a whole host of supplements that I took during COVID to keep my lungs strong, that in the event, because I'm an asthmatic. And then I thought, if I catch COVID, I could be in trouble. So there was this whole host of supplements I was taking, and guess what? I caught COVID when I ran out of all my supplements, and I was like too cheap to go replenish them all one week. And guess what? In that week, I caught COVID. I wasn't sick, probably because I had kept my lungs healthy through these supplements. So I'm very passionate about this. We should be, as governments, we should be allowing people to take control of their own healthcare. I mean, the legislation surrounding, people's healthcare actually says we should have choice, and yet government continually takes choice away from us as the taxpayer. So, I don't know. This is scary to me. When they start telling us which supplements we can and cannot take, supplements that are safe, or they start taxing us more on those supplements, I don't understand it, especially when we have a healthcare system that is continually overwhelmed. Why wouldn't you want people to take control of their own healthcare and try and keep themselves healthy? It's craziness to me.
I remember as kids, they used to preach to us, always take your vitamins.
Oh yeah, I
Well,
took
what's
Fred
going on
Flintstone
now? Why
vitamins.
now we have to tax your vitamin? Now we don't want you taking those vitamins.
Yeah, they're
Um,
scary
it,
things.
yeah,
Mhm.
it's kind of different that way, isn't it? And I
And you
agree with
know,
you.
yeah, you know, there are people who say to me, "Oh, vitamins don't work." Okay, that's fine. You believe that. You don't
That's your
have to
call.
take them. But even if it's like, what is that word? Psychosomatic. Even if I think that I'm feeling better because I took my supplements, that's my business. Let me think that I'm feeling better.
Yeah, and you know what? If that, I agree with you. I mean, you got to have your daily vitamin C. You got to make sure you get these things. I mean, as you age, again,
Mhm.
we want to keep our eyesight good. We're going to need our vitamins. Come on.
That's right. No, I think it should actually be the reverse. And I've thought about private members bill on how, we could incentivize people, a tax incentive for people to actually go and submit their receipts for supplements and vitamins and everything else. And they should get a kickback because we are saving we are saving the healthcare system in the long run. And I firmly believe that.
I always felt, I'm glad you brought that up because it's a little off track, but I always felt that they should be doing that for exercise. If
Mm-hmm.
you join a gym and your coach or whatever says, yeah, checked
Yeah.
off every day, you get that back. You get that plus some because you're trying to stay healthy. Like
Yeah.
incentivize these programs, right? So that people
Mm-hmm.
understand the value of being healthy. Makes for a
Yeah.
better community.
We see all these public service announcements, and I won't say, which organizations, but every organization out there for, you know, uh, collecting money for certain causes says do this, this, and this, and yet we see government kind of working against that. I don't get it. I don't know why we wouldn't want people to take control of their own health to a certain degree.
I agree. Couple things I checked out on your website I wanted to ask you about as well. One being the petition for the gun buyback, and in that article you talk about Alberta, Saskatchewan, New Brunswick, and Yukon saying no, we don't want part of this.
Mm-hmm.
This is a federal initiative, folks, but
Mm-hmm.
it boils down to the province making their own decisions. I think somewhat on this. You can explain it better to me. I'm with you on this one.
Mm-hmm.
I have certain areas I think guns should be. I have certain issues with guns that I think need to be addressed, but I'm with you because I understand the
Yeah,
value in the rural communities, the importance of hunting and fishing and all that.
for sure.
But uh, go ahead, you have the floor on this. Give me
Yeah,
your
so
thoughts.
just right up front, disclaimer: I've never owned a gun. My family never owned guns. We didn't hunt, but I have a deep respect for those folks who do. A few weeks ago, I went out to the Waterford Sportsman Club. They had an open house where they showed folks the proper, like how guns are stored and in proper use, this, that, and the other. Um, I think that's fantastic. We have a culture of, especially in rural Ontario, rural Canada, of people hunting and filling their freezers. I really respect that, especially in this day and age. I wish I could fill my freezer with meat because, a lot of times, you're making pasta instead because you can't afford the meat. So I have this deep respect for those who actually can fill their freezers. Um, but my biggest concern with Canada's gun laws is that they're flawed. They're severely flawed. They do nothing to stop the flow of guns coming in from the U.S. underground. And I was recently at the chief of police dinner in North York. I got invited through my work on contraband tobacco. And I was at that dinner, and I spoke to Guns and Gangs unit, and we had quite a fulsome conversation about this. And they said, you're exactly right. And they said the government doesn't want to recognize where these guns are coming from. There's 4 states that they're coming in from. And the government would rather create this false sense of security. And that's what it is. Canada's gun laws create a false sense of security. They sound good on the 6 o'clock news. They look good in headlines, but they actually, the proposal that Justin Trudeau has on the table that he wants the provinces to support would actually make our streets more dangerous because they're going to take resources off the streets and go to your door and say, hey, Dave, do you have a gun? Is it registered? Do you have guns that are illegal? That takes resources off the streets. We already have a shortage of police officers to the point we are offering free tuition. So why would we take more police officers off the street? And you can bet that the criminals will know the police officers are off the streets. And guess what? The streets become more dangerous. False sense of security is bad, 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 bad policy. And I on the day that I brought this up in the legislature, I think it was November 30th, Mitzi Hunter stood up and she talked about kids in Scarborough Guildwood being afraid to go to school because kids were taking guns. And in my line of questioning, I actually said, if government proposed policy that would actually keep those kids safe, keep our streets safe, I would be the first to stand in my place and vote in favor of that policy. But that's not what we're doing. We're creating policy that doesn't make sense and just gives people a false sense of security, and it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. In Ontario, I'm very disappointed with Ontario's approach to this. They should have joined the other provinces who have already said no, and they should have said no. When you guys come to us with real gun policy that will keep the people of Ontario safe, then we will help you. But we're not going to prop up, a false sense of security. And Ontario refuses to say no to Justin Trudeau. And I've had conversations with Ontario's Solicitor General about this, and he says, "Oh yeah, I get it, Bobbi Ann, I get it." But he represents a downtown Toronto riding, and I'm not sure that he does get it. So I won't let that one go. And it's not because I'm some sort of gun-toting Beth Dutton. That's not the case here. I'm all about being honest and genuine. And Canada and Ontario, Ontario propping up poor policy is not okay with me.
I'd be interested to see the rate of crime involving guns comparative to city to rural. You know what I mean? Because they're obviously in the city, there's huge problems. There's massive problems. So if you're looking at it, you might want to look at it territorial. I think you and I have talked about this before.
Yeah.
But maybe ban guns in the city. I don't know. But you've got to have some kind of rules, because I agree. Like children should not be afraid to go to school. You need to look at that issue and address it. And the illegal guns. What's the percentage of honorable registered gun owners comparative to illegal guns in this country?
That's right.
Let's break down those numbers.
And it makes me angry because I spoke about this. I spoke about this issue on November 30th, and not one reporter asked me about this after question period. I thought for sure it was Purple Scarf Day that day, which is violence against women. Mitzi Hunter stood up and talked about this, and then the Independent from Haldimand Norfolk gets up and talks about guns. I thought for sure a reporter would be waiting for me outside of question period. Not one. And then the day that they asked me about it was December 28th, the day after Constable Perchala was fatally shot in Hagersville. And I went after the reporter. I said, "Where were you on November 30th?" And she said, "Well, what was November 30th?" I said, "I talked about guns." And because she asked me, she says, "How do you feel about legal gun ownership?" But I said, "I don't have a problem with legal gun ownership." And I said, "Where were you November 30th?" I said, "You want to have this conversation now after one of our officers has been fatally shot?" I said, "We have flawed gun policy. That gun that killed Officer Perchala is an illegal gun. Let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about where that gun came from." Nobody wants to have that conversation. The government the Ontario government has to put more heat on the federal government to go after those guns coming in from the U.S. Toby actually went to, I think it was Idaho, to SARL. It's a State Agricultural Rural Leaders Convention. I was invited. I was supposed to go, and I was supposed to talk about legal gun ownership in Canada at that convention. But that was the same week as Constable Perchala's funeral, and I wanted to attend Constable Perchala's funeral. So Toby went to Idaho because he had a relationship with SARL when he was MPP. And so he came to my Facebook page while he was in at the convention, and he says, "Oh, the Americans are really upset with Justin Trudeau's gun policy." I said, "That's great. I'm glad they're upset, because now they can start putting heat on their own government to keep their illegal guns in their own country."
Yeah, exactly. Wow. I'm going to
got me fired up now, Dave.
I was just going to say, I'm going to lighten the mood a bit. Were you down to Dunnville, number 6 museum? Did you go down and visit?
I go down there quite often.
I
Yeah, I was
Isn't that a
there.
great museum?
Yeah, I love it.
Oh, me too. I mean, the history. I think that's kind of one of those hidden gems in Haldeman.
It is. Mm-hmm.
We did a story about 5 or 6 years ago, got the tour, spent the day there. Like I was thinking, I've been to Vimy Ridge. I've been to lots to really cool museums, the one in Ottawa, but it was such an interesting feeling because, a couple of the folks that had passed away during the war had gone there that were from Haldeman. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, Haldeman, Norfolk. So it was that feeling. And they did such a great job. I mean, my impressions were if you get a chance, folks, if you live in the area and if you don't live in the area, go see it. It's well worth it, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, I was saying to my dad actually on Father's Day, we were talking about the museum. And I said, you just need to go and you need to crawl inside some of these aircraft. And you just get this very eerie feeling because you just think, how the heck did this thing ever stay in the air? Like,
Yeah, tin
just to
cans.
sit in it on the ground, you don't feel comfortable. And man, what they went through. And I mean, Haldeman County has a an a rich
Yeah,
air military
background.
history that I
Yeah,
spoke about in a newspaper column a few weeks ago, and I will be speaking about again at Remembrance Day. I've been asked to be at the Caledonia Legion on Remembrance Day. I've asked to be their guest speaker and talk about that rich history. And I think people they don't realize how
yeah.
important this area was during World War II.
Well, and just the amount of people from around the world that went through it too for training.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had no clue, and it was an eye opener. And it's kind of one of those. It is. When I get an opportunity to go down there, it's a hidden gem, folks. Do
Yep.
look it up online, check it out. It's
Mm-hmm.
well worth a visit, and it's such a piece of our history that we need to appreciate and understand.
Absolutely. And fun fact is that the movie Amelia was largely filmed in and around Dunville a few years back,
Didn't know that.
starring Hilary Swank.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
she stayed at the Lawler Inn at the time, and I believe much of that movie was filmed at the Dunville Airport.
I did not know that. Very cool. Very cool. One last question. I know you're busy today, and I don't want to keep you long, but I'm confused. So I keep reading about the government wanting to do allowing the farmers to to separate 3 lots on their property. This is provincial, folks, too. I'm not sure what it means. If I'm a farmer, do I want this? Don't I want this? Are we protecting our agricultural land? Where is this standing? Because I've been following this bits and pieces, and I can't come to a consensus on what the heck is going on. It's part
Yeah,
of what?
you and I both, Dave, and I'm a bit frustrated by this because, you know full well I campaigned on saving Ontario's most productive farmland. I introduced a private members bill this winter that talked about saving Ontario's most productive farmland, and the majority of the Conservative caucus actually agreed with my private members bill, but couldn't vote in favor of it. One of the things that my private members bill would have done would have created a committee uh, that would look at land use issues across the province. So right now we kind of have this zero severance policy. I don't agree with that either. If I'm a farmer and I have 50 plus acres or whatever, and I want to create a succession planning lot, there's argument whether or not it's better to sever it or not sever it, whatever. That's a debate for another day. But if I want to create a succession planning lot where I want to, sever off a piece of land so that I can and sell it and reinvest back in my farm to keep the farm going, I don't have a problem with that. And in my private members bill, I talked about this. I said, a speculator, if I'm a farmer, a speculator can drive up my driveway. He can offer me millions of dollars. And who's going to begrudge the guy who says, you know what, I can take care of the next 5 generations with what I just made here from the speculator? Who can begrudge that guy, right? The problem is it's pitting farmer against farmer. So you have, the speculator drives up there, offers millions of dollars, and paves over the entire farm, and yet farmer B over here can't sever off or can't split off an acre of land for a succession planning lot. That's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. So I'm confused though, and I asked the question in the House a few weeks ago, and it got bounced to the Premier. I asked the question how we went from 0 severances to 3, because I think that there's significance to the 3. Why isn't it 1 severance? Why isn't it 2? Why is it 3? And the question was never answered. The premier backed down on the 3 and pulled me aside after a question period and said, "Hey, Bobbi Ann, I'm going to look after your farmers." And I said, "Which ones? Like, you need to look after all of them, right?" So I have a meeting coming up this Thursday night, because I've said to my farmers, I've got farmers who say, "Yeah, I want 3 severances," and I have farmers who say, "I don't need 3 severances. I'd be happy with 0, or I'd be happy with 1." So I've said to them, "Listen, how can I take forward a position when I don't know what the position is? I can have my opinion on this, but it's not my job as MPP to inform them what their opinion is. My job is to take their opinion forward. And right now, there is no opinion to take forward, because farmers are all over on this one. And I think this is purposeful. I think this is very purposeful from the Ford government. And they floated this lead balloon to try and win back rural Ontario, because they've lost much of rural Ontario at this point in time by paving over it. Now they're pitting farmer against farmer. So, I've said to my farmers, look, you know what? You need to tell me. You need to tell me what the consensus is going forward here. I've had farmers say to me, "We've got enough productive land, we can pave over," and then I've got farmers who are saying, "No, we can't." So what's the consensus? I'm really, really frustrated by this one, Dave. And I'm really frustrated by the fact that there are farmers out there who can't see that my private members bill would have actually gotten them, headway on this issue had we been able to create that committee.
I think you're on the right track, though. Having a meeting, get everybody together. Let's have a conversation, right? Let's start there and figure this out. What's best for each? Yeah, I mean, you can't play to each scenario, but you need a majority to understand, to set the path so we know where we're going. And I'm totally with you. I think if a farmer wants to have an opportunity to help his family, to sever a lot or do whatever, then that's his choice. And there needs to be some ruling in place that can happen. But again, I think there's a lot of smoke here. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but there's something else to this.
Yeah.
I hope not, but it looks that way. And I know you're going to keep asking those questions.
This is a government who has created more change to development policies than any other government in the history of Ontario in such a short period of time. And I keep saying to the farmers, I say, do you honestly think that this is for you? This is not for you. And that's my concern. I want my farmers protected. And I don't think this is about helping our farmers. I think this is a carrot that's being dangled, and they'll never, ever see those 3 lots. So they're never going to see what the government is promising them. And it's just going to help developers create that urban sprawl. And that is my concern. So the legislation has already passed. This is also the wonky part of this, is that this whole issue of the 3 severances, or the policy statement, is still on the environmental registry. So anyone who actually has, any interest in helping form opinion on this should be going to the environmental registry before August 6th. It was supposed to be at the beginning of June, and they extended the deadline because there's been so much controversy. So they extended the deadline to August 6th. And I think to myself, we've already passed this legislation. It passed before the House rose on June 8th. So I couldn't vote in favor of this legislation because I don't know what the rest of it looks like. How do I know how this is going to affect, Ontario farmland? How do I know how this is going to affect our farmers? So, one of my colleagues and I, we talked about this, and we said, how do we vote on a piece of legislation when a huge chunk of it that is so integral to our ridings is not yet included? It's mind blowing.
It's speculation. You can't base everything on speculation here. You need to have some groundwork done. But this is a tough one. You've got your work cut out for you on this one. This is definitely, I hope all the farmers can come together in unison to have a voice, especially in Hull Norfolk, because that's what they need to do.
Well, and I said to farmers, I said, you really need to think long and hard about whether or not you want to sever those off, right? Do we need a severance, or do we just need to create those lots for succession planning and everything else? Because in 10 years down the road, who's to say who's going to own those 3 lots? If they get outside of the family's hands, now all of a sudden you have somebody who has moved into, rural Ontario who says, oh, look at, I like the trees and I like the landscape and everything else, but doesn't understand that the farmer actually has to farm. And I understand there's rules in place, for farming practices and everything else. But at the end of the day, even though those rules are in place, as the farmer, you still have to prove that you're acting within those rules. So those rules are to protect you, but you still have to prove your innocence, kind of thing. And it's a pain in the butt. And we've had folks who have called in and said, you know what, this is a bad idea. Years ago, I severed off an acre. It's now in the hands of somebody who's moved in, who doesn't understand what I do to make a living. And they're constantly complaining, right? And so we have to be careful what we wish for. We have to make sure that this policy is done properly, or else it could be a disaster.
Yep, especially when you got a lot of southwest wind.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, that issue has me really fired up, and I hope that I have a good turnout Thursday night, because I really don't know how I put forward an opinion on this. I wrote about it last week, and it's hard to put forward an opinion when I've got farmers on all sides of the issue. And that also concerns me. We saw this with windmills. We saw this with solar panel. Is farmer being pitted against farmer? So if this does not apply equally to all farmers, then you're going to have farmer A here going, hey, you know what? Charlie got to do it, and I don't. Now I don't like Charlie because Charlie just made $1.2 million off the severing of 3 acres. Well, that's inappropriate.
And I think you got to look at this as an opportunity to bring those farmers together, right? It's an opportunity to consolidate and find an area on this subject where they can all agree, a common sense approach that way. But I agree with you. I mean, man, it's part of the fun of politics. You've been in it a year. You've seen it all already. I mean, you've been doing it 20 years, but over 20 years. But I mean, now as the MPP, you're seeing it. So I wish you really good luck on this issue, Bobbi. And
we'll talk about it next month.
Yeah, I look forward to hanging out with you next month. Take care, okay?
All right. Thanks, Dave.